Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Lloyd. We're in Rochester, Vermont at Wing Farm at the Vermont WILPF Gathering, which has happened every year for 20 years. And it's in a very modified form now. You can see that we're trying to respect social distancing. So our first guest here is Charlotte Dennett. And Charlotte and her husband arrived in 1984, and she had just, she and her husband had just completed the book, Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller, Evangelism in the Age of Oil. Now, I really like that because my great-grandfather wrote a book about which was the first book looking into as a muckraker, looking into monopoly.
And Rockefeller.
And Rockefeller, yeah, of course.
Which is such a coincidence that we should come to Vermont. And one of the first people we met was Robin, whose great-grandfather is famous for doing the first expose on Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil. And we had just completed a book. No, I think we hadn't completed it yet. We're still writing the book on Nelson Rockefeller.
So now we're moving ahead to today. And you may know that Charlotte has written a book that just came out during the pandemic, so it makes it very hard to market it, but we're marketing it right here now. The Crash of the Flight 3804, A Lost Spy, A Daughter's Quest, and the Deadly Politics of the Great Game for Oil. So we invited her to talk today, and we have just 1 hour about Lebanon, and that's part of in this story why she was born in Lebanon. So I asked her to sort of start there and then work her way up to what happened just recently, this big explosion in the port of Lebanon. So
take it away.
Take it away.
Take it away. Okay. Yeah, I was born in Beirut. My father was stationed in Beirut. His cover was cultural attaché with the State Department, but he was really working for the Office of Strategic Services, and that was America's first civilian intelligence organization, and then that became the Central Intelligence Group, which was the immediate predecessor of the CIA. And what he was, in fact, was America's first master spy in the Middle East. He was in charge of counterintelligence. And when he went there, he thought his mission was to spy on the Germans. This is during World War II. But he gets there and he finds out they're already gone. And who is he spying on? He's spying on our wartime allies, the French, the British, and the Russians. I think he was quite amazed to learn that, although he had been fully prepped as to what to expect. And I sued the CIA for documents about him because he died in a plane crash. I never knew him. I was 6 weeks old when it crashed. So I did many things, but I sued the CIA. I sued the CIA, and I got some documents. And I found out in his analysis of work that he should anticipate a real, quote, free-for-all after the war. Why? What were they free-for-alling for? It was oil. And there's this one great line in the document that says, the oil of Saudi Arabia is so important, we must protect it at all costs. And so, anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I was in a plane crash in Ethiopia after a top secret mission to Saudi Arabia. Went back with my mother and my siblings, grew up in Winchester, Mass, went to high school. My 2 years of high school were in Beirut. My mother missed Beirut. She took me there, changed my life. That was the best education I ever got. Then I went on to college. I went on to graduate school, got a master's degree in art history. What was I to do? I went back to Beirut and became a reporter for the Beirut Daily Star and for another magazine called the Middle East Sketch, which sent me all over the Middle East, including the Gulf countries. So people had never even heard those days, like Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Anyway, it was a fantastic experience. When I got home, I was sort of a refugee from the Lebanese Civil War that had started in wait, let me get my dates right, 1975. I was shot at, and that was sort of a warning to me that I better play it safe. And what happened is eventually I was away on vacation when a busload of Palestinians was fired on, and that triggered the Civil War that lasted for 15 years. And so I went back to the States, and while I was in the States, I realized that I had probably been following my father's footsteps, and I was kind of curious. I became curious. What was he doing? Plus, there was a lot of books coming out at this time about the CIA. As you know, the CIA was very active in Vietnam. So I began to think, what was my father doing? And then I got really interested in what happened with the plane crash. What were the events leading up to it? So that is the subject of this book. So the first thing that I wanted to look at was determine the route of the Arabia. It was going to take oil from eastern Saudi Arabia, cross the desert to a terminal point. So you'll see a dotted line there. That was the projected route of the Trans-Arabian Pipeline. And as you can see, it crosses two other pipelines that you see up there. They're taking the oil of Iraq to two different terminal points. One of them is Haifa, Palestine, and the other one is in northern Lebanon. And then there was this third huge pipeline. It was the biggest industrial construction event in the world, believe it or not, laying this pipeline. And it had huge political importance, is what I found out. I looked in, I based this map on a wonderful article in the New York Times that appeared just 2 weeks before his death and described all the political intrigue about this pipeline. Like, for instance, whose territory was it going to pass through? Where was the oil going? The oil was going to Europe, and it was going to help Europe recover from the war with the oil, and at the same time convert oil and to defeat the communist coal unions. So the Cold War was already off and running. Anyway, the other thing that you see is Eastern Mediterranean. Look at those countries: Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey, with Cyprus sort of just off the coast. That area became strategically very important.
How did Lebanon get created?
Lebanon was created by the French initially after World War I. And as a matter of fact, the two pipeline branches you see, the southern one was controlled by the British in the British mandate, and the northern one in Tripoli had landed under the French mandate in Syria. They set up these mandates supposedly so the people in these countries could learn to rule themselves, but it was really a colonial operation. And the people that lived there really did not appreciate it, and eventually revolted. Lebanon got its independence in 43, I believe, and Syria in 46. They threw off the yoke of the British. Then there was Palestine, and what happened, this is a time when Jews are escaping the Holocaust, and the Brits control Palestine at the time. And so this is sort of the origin of the whole Middle East conflict. But, you know, what's not revealed in most explanations and histories is the oil connection. When I was in Lebanon as a reporter, I was told that Lebanon was the gateway to the Middle East. And then I learned later on that oil people see it differently. They see it as the gateway to Middle East oil, as you can see from this map, because what are the countries that border these crucial Eastern Mediterranean countries? Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, and then Iran off to the east. So that's the context.
So if the pipelines didn't exist, the oil would have to be taken through the, what do you call it, the Persian Gulf and past that Hormuz and all the way around.
That's true. Yeah,
to the Suez.
Yes, it would go around.
Which is sort of a blocking point also.
Yeah, that's another point. Maybe you could. Let's see, let's put up a second map. This is, by studying this, just one last thing, and reading this article, it was titled A New Pipeline for the Middle East, and they were worried about the position of Russia. Imagine that, over 70 years ago, that Russia was a real concern to them. To the US. Yeah. But the other thing I learned is they're all fighting against each other. The British were very jealous of this huge stake in Saudi oil. I mean, it was the great bonanza, really, of World War II, just like the oil of Iraq was the great prize for the British of World War I. But they're all scheming against each other. And I explore that in the book. And that's part of the having to solve the mystery. I had learned from a CIA guy that replaced my father, and he told me that my father was a great loss. That's because he was a scholar of Islamic studies, could speak Arabic, read the Quran and all that. But he said he knew the area very thoroughly. And then he said to me, we always thought it was sabotage, but we could never prove it. So of course that got me going. All right.
Could I ask you to describe Lebanon and what Lebanon and Beirut is like, and what it was like then and what it was like now, and maybe moving toward the explosion, and then I want to have time for people to ask questions.
Yeah. All right. So when I was in Lebanon, first I was there in the 60s, and then I was there in the 70s. A lot was going on. Lebanon was beautiful, though. It was
crossroads of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a crossroads.
Paris of the Middle East.
Yeah, Paris of the Middle East. That's right, and that's what it was. Paris, the French controlled it for a long time. But
now Macron's right.
But I mean, it really was beautiful. It's beautiful. It's on the Mediterranean Sea. It has mountains. You can swim during the day and go or ski in the day and swim, in the evening because of the lovely mountains. So
you can remove the map now. You can.
Oh yeah. Okay, you can take the map, but we'll come back to the second map. So anyway, what were you asking? Oh, what was Lebanon like? When I was there, first of all, the 1967 war, in which Israel was able to take a piece of Syria called the Golan Heights. That happened. That was when I was in high school. And then when I was a reporter, I happened to be in Abu Dhabi, as a matter of fact, when the October 1973 war happened, and that was when Egypt actually attacked Israel, and then there was a standoff. Anyway, so war was a factor when I was there, but it wasn't in Lebanon. It was outside of Lebanon and all around. But what happened is the Civil War. As I said, 75 it started. I was visiting somebody, and I was in a taxi, a communal taxi, and all of a sudden this big tanker comes zooming down the road with its turret swinging and so on. We all fled. I took cover in a school, and there was shooting all around me, and I was able to escape. A guy came back to rescue me. He said, either you stay here tonight and it's going to be occupied by people, you don't know who it is, or you come with me. And I went with him, and I was shot at as I was racing away. So that was a wake-up call. At the time, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I did know that that the Palestinians, many of them had become refugees in Lebanon, and they were not appreciated. They had become quite strong. There were radical groups working with them, and so there were elements in Lebanon that wanted them out, primarily the Christian Maronites, and there were right-wing factors working with them. And so really, I think that's what the war was all about when you really want to look at it. It was to get the Palestinians out and Arafat out.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
All right, so when was the Civil War? When did it break out?
It started in 1975, and it lasted till 1990.
Okay, and it was basically about the Palestinians?
It was, I mean, there were different factions, but all fighting themselves. I mean, Lebanon is ridden with factions. I mean, this is very important. It's, no, you can talk. Keep talking. You can hear me? Okay. So, yeah, it was set up, as they say, it's a very sectarian government. The president has to be a Christian, and the prime minister has to be a Muslim, actually a Sunni, and then the speaker or something is a Shiite. And that worked for a while. Everyone felt they had some power, a piece of it. But as I was saying, I think the bottom line is, it was not only the Maronite Christians, they're always allied with the Christian West, right? And the Palestinians were becoming very radicalized. Many of them did not like the idea of a two-state solution. They wanted a secular democratic state in Israel, and so that was going on. Anyway, long story short, the Palestinians were removed. The Syrians stepped in at one point. People didn't appreciate the Syrians occupying the country. And so the kicker that got the Syrians out happened in 2005. The Civil War was over, but the prime minister, whose name was Hariri, was assassinated in a car bomb. And it was a huge explosion, left a huge crater. And so you can imagine, with all these different factions and with all these wars going on and assassinations, the people of Lebanon are very political, and conspiracy theories abound. And the job of the reporter is to figure out what the truth is, which is not always easy because there's so many factions. But I have certain methods that I use. I don't know if we could get into it about how I examined the Beirut explosion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, or
this current explosion?
Yeah.
Beirut.
Any other questions before?
I mean, it's unclear to me, Charlotte, how were the Palestinians involved? Had they been driven out of Israel and they encamped to Lebanon?
I'm sorry.
And when was that? 67?
No, they were driven out in 48.
Okay.
Yeah, so they became refugees
in Lebanon.
Lebanon, most of the refugee camps were in the south. There were some in central Beirut, and during the Civil War, of course, there was this horrific attack on two camps, Sabra and Shatila, and what happened is Maronite Christians who were backed by Israelis just wiped out these people. Hundreds were killed. This was the beginning of an international semi-awakening about Israel's policy towards the Palestinians. Because here was an example. Israel's at this time, and this was in
82.
82, good for you.
At the time of the Great Walk for Disarmament in New York City. That was happening right during the march, and no one brought it up from the podium.
Yeah, people didn't bring it up because news in the Middle East was very censored. That's what I found out. I saw a whole different picture living over there about what was going on. And then when I got back to the States and couldn't get the stories out. But in the end, Sabra and Shatila was a turning point. I mean, it was in the news, and it was so vicious and horrific that there began to be a questioning, shall we put it, of Israeli policies. All right, that's 82. And then you end the war in 1990. But I mean, Lebanon was just torn apart. 100,000 people were killed in the civil war. And so there were these different factions trying to control the government afterwards. And this is when the corruption really sets in. A lot of foreign aid came in, and it made the politicians beholden to it. That's my understanding. I wasn't there at this time. I knew that Lebanon was pretty, there was a lot of corruption in the government, even when I was there. But apparently after the Civil War, it got worse, and a lot of neglect. So, of course, when the explosion in Beirut recently happened.
I'm sorry, I have another question. So why did the Civil War end? And after, you said 1990, is that correct? Was there any kind of peace? What happened between 90 and now?
Well, there was a semblance of peace. Mm-hmm. And how did it end? There was a peace agreement that was actually signed in Saudi Arabia, Taif. You know, the different factions tried to coexist, even though they had been fighting themselves. So it was very unstable. Mm-hmm. It was never a good scene. And by the time, as I say, by the time this explosion happened, it was a couple of weeks ago. I mean, Lebanon was already prostrate, totally. Their currency had been devalued by 80%, a huge unemployment. The garbage. Well, the banks. I mean,
Which banks?
The central bank in Lebanon that was particularly responsible for that, and a lot of the protesters went against the central bank. So in terms of in terms of what was happening before, Lebanon was already close to being flattened. You can keep that up, by the way, if you want. I just want to show you that. You know, the other thing that happened right before this explosion is the, quote, civil war in Syria, right next door. And what you see on this map is two competing pipelines, which I analyze in the context of what started the civil war, namely that Assad rejected the lower pipeline that was going to carry gas from Qatar up through Europe. He rejected it primarily because the Syrians didn't want it. It would compete. They were the major suppliers of natural gas to Europe. And then in 1910, Assad came up with an alternative, which was going to be carrying gas and oil from Iran through Syria. And Iran is an ally of Syria. So the West didn't like that. And that's when the CIA and the other allies, NATO allies, and their proxy groups, terrorist groups, whatever, began to really increase pressure on the Assad regime with the clear intention of certainly undermining him, if not totally overthrowing him. And that's,
I think you said 1910, did she, or was it 2000? Right?
I said, yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you for correcting me. Yeah, I meant 20. Sorry, yeah, that's right. Okay, so 2010, yes. 2009 and 2010 were these two competing pipeline schemes. All right, so you can take that map down, put the third one up. And then finally, the other factor before all this happened is there are gigantic oil and gas. And they were discovered in the last, 2000, the last 20 years. When it was discovered in 2000, it was quite clear that some off the coast of Gaza. So Yasser Arafat was saying, this is wonderful for us. Finally, we're going to have an economy of our own. The Israelis did not want it. And as I show in my book, the attacks on Gaza, especially in 2009 and 2014, were to absolutely level it, to pummel it. And I even have quotes from Israeli generals saying we want to send them back to the Dark Ages. That's the plan. They don't want the Gazans to get control over any of those oil and gas fields, claiming that'll just be money that'll feed into terrorism. So that is another oil connection to the terrible conflicts. Now, so let's come to the Beirut explosion. I have a rule of thumb: whenever crisis on the level of what happened in Beirut, I watch the news, every piece of news I can see or read in the first 48 hours. And the reason for doing that is that there are witness reports. And, the reporters are so anxious to get news, they'll talk to witness. What did you see? So I start really focusing in on what, and I'll tell you what the witnesses saw. And also look at videos before, during, and after the explosion. So what I immediately picked out was there was a Lebanese woman. She was a reporter. She was interviewed on Al Jazeera, and she described watching TV. Suddenly she heard the planes overhead, and so she ran out to the balcony, and suddenly there was an explosion. And then she said she wouldn't say Israeli planes, but I've gotten it from other witness interviews that they believe those were Israeli planes, because Israeli planes have been flying over Lebanese airspace a lot to get to Syria. Yeah. But I mean, they just do it. I mean, they would not have done this when I was living there. But because since Trump, the Israelis have just given extraordinary freedom to act as they wish. And they have mounted many attacks on arms depots in Syria. And they are controlled by Hezbollah.
Wait a minute. Can I ask another question? What you're saying then is that, and I think it existed before Trump also, that Israel was already bombing Syria.
Oh yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay, so why does Israel bomb Syria, and then also why might they have bombed this explosion in Beirut? All right.
Well, first of all, because the Syrians have been traditionally anti-Israel. That's one thing. I mean, they just have. They're not likely to make peace. Yeah, the Iranians too. Well, they've suffered. Israel attacked and seized the Golan Heights, for instance.
In 67.
Yeah, in 67. And so there's no love between the Syrians and the Israelis. The Syrians were also considered, highly nationalistic and part of the so-called rejection front back in the 70s. Believe it or not, they rejected the two-state solution. Yeah. They wanted one state. Okay, so there's already that enmity. Now let's go to the third map, Ellen, if you can put that up. Oh, you've already got it up. All right. The other thing is, any one of those maps will do, if you can put it up. There's another reason why Israel is bombing Syria. It's because it wants to create an energy corridor all along that Eastern Mediterranean, because now they found these huge oil and gas fields off the coast. Now, how are they going to ship them? Ideally, they wanted to ship them up the coast and then out to Europe. But who's in the way? Lebanon is in the way of that corridor going from south, as you can see, Gaza, all the way north into Turkey. Lebanon's in the way, and so is Syria. So that, now what I know, then another thing I apply when a crisis happens is some history. And I really remembered in the book a statement by former NATO commander Wesley Clark, who said that in 2003, this was shortly after Bush sent troops into Iraq, a Pentagon person had told him that the plan was to wipe out 7 countries in 5 years. And Lebanon and Syria and Sudan and Iraq and Iran and Yemen, they were all on the list, okay? And like, what's happened since then, you know? I mean, this is starting to get me angry. Anyway, I mean, I cannot tell you the destruction of lives and property, and has just been massive and horrendous, and it's happened, frankly, all my lifetime. Ever since World War II. So now coming to the explosion. So I told you about the woman saying she saw the airplanes overhead, and then boom, the huge explosion.
Airplanes, is that right?
Oh yeah, some say they were American airplanes, but most of what I've read is that they were Israelis, which is not surprising because they often do it. All right, what else have I seen? Yes, well, then I saw videos. And the videos clearly showed that there was a fire before the big explosion. And in one video, you could see the sparks. Okay. The next thing I observed is the day of the explosion, Rachel Maddow came on. And she talked about the explosion, and then she told what Trump said. Trump saying, well, I talked to my generals, and they told me it's an attack.
Yeah.
They think it's a bomb. Rachel Maddow, when he said that, I mean, I was quite amazed. She said, that you do not do as a president. That is a no-no. And I think I could have sworn I heard her mutter that it could start a war.
Why? What is she covering up?
Well, I mean,
and MSNBC.
Yeah,
she is everything.
Yeah,
well,
I know that.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, she's right. You know, Trump, here's the thing, it kind of came down to who's going to believe Trump. He was probably just lying. He was probably just boasting because he lies all the time. But the other thing is sometimes Trump is really inartful and stupid and blurts things out like, oh, we're going to return the troops to Syria to protect our oil. Was that stupid?
We're going to get rid of the post office. So we can,
well, yeah, get rid of, I mean,
we can stop the voter.
you know, this guy, he doesn't
say something.
He doesn't think
A
far
broken
ahead.
clock is right twice a day. That's how I always think about Trump.
Really?
Exactly.
Yes, because he, I think, was right here.
Well, okay, so it's obviously, since our president said that, I mean, it's got to be explored,
Yeah,
right? But what happened is that the media immediately, I've never seen the cover-up happen, so if it's a cover-up. As I said, my idea, watch for 48 hours. Why? Because then the cover-up begins, you know. Then the witness stories start to disappear and the cover story comes out. And what was it? This was negligence and incompetence. And a lot of the protesters were saying that. And the fact is, yeah, there was negligence and incompetence because you had 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate sitting in that port for 6 years. And it's highly dangerous, and it was warned about. So there's no dispute about that.
Excuse me, you have to mention about how ammonium nitrate does not explode on its own.
No, it does not self-ignite. That was another thing that I picked up. It has to be very, very high temperature. Some people were saying, you know, well, it's warm, it's hot there. No, it's got to be, I forget, but it's high temperature to get it to ignite.
Okay, could I just intervene here and ask Ellen, are there any urgent questions coming from the chat box so far?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No.
She's thinking.
Oh,
okay.
Everybody's sitting at the edge of their seats to hear the next one.
Really? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, self-ignite. So then my question continues to be the burning question. The burning question.
Fire.
Who lit the match?
Yeah.
I mean, who ignited the explosion? All right. So now the explanation is there was a welder nearby.
Yeah.
And it was,
welder.
yeah,
Right.
and the welders sparked it. Now, I don't know if a little spark from a welder can ignite
Right.
ammonium nitrate. So then I was looking for other stuff, and yeah, sure enough, there started to be articles and even some videos saying that it was an attack. It was an attack by Israel. It was nuclear with a small nuclear bomb. And I just saw this today, mounted, and this is important for Vermonters, on an F-6. Reason that's important is because Vermont is now storing F-35s, and we've always been concerned that they can carry, they're nuclear capable, and that's why there's this huge revolt but a good part of Vermont, we don't want them stationed here. That's a whole other story, but that kind of blew my mind. I just read that
but
today.
if there was radioactivity, they can go in and find out.
Well, yeah, they can. I mean,
so has that been found?
Well, first of all, nobody's talking about it. You see, here's the big thing. It's hard to prove. It's hard to prove, but I've been seeing
radioactivity is
you
easy
can't
to measure.
Yeah. All right, well then they should do that, and we should all be looking to see if anyone went in there to see that. I mean, I told one of the protesters who I talked to, I said, you should gather dust at the site. I mean, there's incredible.
If it's radioactive.
Well, we didn't know it then. When I told her that, we were thinking more like 9/11 and whether you saw, frankly, explosive material, which was found.
Okay, but could you also then go to let us assume that maybe Israel played a role in causing this explosion. So what?
Oh, so what? Well, it's huge. And I think that's why, the media, everyone's being really careful. They know that this whole region is a tinderbox ready to go up.
Wait a minute, can I ask another question about Israel's role? So as I understand it, if Israel was involved, if they bombed Beirut, basically, why is that? Is that like the opening shots of war against Iran? Or what? What's
all right,
the deal
if, and that's if, and we haven't fully proved it yet, but in terms of what happened before and what Israel's plans are for the region and energy flattening Gaza and conceivably flattening Lebanon, that would be the objective. I mean, Lebanon is prostrate. Right. It's ruined, right? And so what did you ask me?
Well, my question is why Lebanon? I think because they were basically bombing probably Hezbollah.
Oh, yeah. That's the other point. That's a very good point.
Regime change.
There's no regime. It's nothing. There is nothing. But no, Hezbollah. This is very important. Yeah, and this is coming out. This is coming out now. Hezbollah has been, as I mentioned earlier, has been targeted in Syria, and Hezbollah is allied with Iran. And there's a lot of tension going on with Iran now. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think there was an Israeli bomb part of a nuclear facility in Iran. Right. Iran did not respond. And the reason Iran did not respond is because they're waiting for the elections. They're not going to be provoked into a war. We all know that there are warmongers around Trump. And when you look at the desperation of this president, who is doing everything in his power to stay in power because he knows otherwise he's going to be convicted for multiple crimes when he gets out and thrown in jail. So he will do everything he can to stay in power. And then you've got Netanyahu, who is in a very similar position. He's very vulnerable. He's under investigation. He's on trial right now for corruption. So you put the two together, and of course everyone is just bracing for a stupid action to start World War III, frankly. But it would start in the Middle East, and it's another rush for power. The neoconservatives who were behind the war in Iraq and behind Bush, they wanted Iraq, and had something to do with restoring a pipeline between Iraq and Haifa. By the way, I've got that pipeline in the book. That was one of the causes of the invasion in Iraq. But they've always wanted Iran and Iran's enormous oil wealth. And of course, they use the Iran's nuclear capability as sort of the pretext for having to contain Iran. Iran is like Syria. They have a long history of suffering from actions by Western nations. The coup in 1953 that overthrew Mossadegh, and then there was the 1979 hostage crisis, which I describe in the book. I have a whole piece on that because I talked to hostage families, and they thought it was all a setup. How do you like that? Connecting to Chase Bank. The Ayatollah was withdrawing all Iran's petrodollars from Chase Bank. So when the embassy was seized, the assets were seized. And those $4 billion of $8 billion that was seized got returned as part of the Iran nuclear deal. But that's a side thing. But anyway, I mean, keep your eyes on it. Turkey's very active now. Turkey is making raids into northern Syria. So it's just, if they want to get into a war, we all know that presidents love wars, don't they? They think the war is going to make them popular. I kind of think it's not going to happen this time. I don't know. I don't think people will rally.
I think the war will happen. You're not saying that. What you're saying is that it won't be popular.
Yeah, I'm thinking if it happens, I don't think there'll be the same rallying around the flag, because the Americans have wised up. They knew that the war in Iraq was based on a phony pretext, weapons of mass destruction. The person who came up with that idea was an Iraqi exile named Ahmed Shalabi. Mm-hmm. And he was pro-Israel. He was in favor of reconnecting a pipeline between Iraq and Haifa. And he was going to be the guy that overthrew Hussein. And when the fake weapons of mass destruction story came out, he was totally discredited. So they didn't have their puppet to put after they overthrew Saddam Hussein. And, you know, all these interventions have not done well. I mean, basically the Americans lost in Syria. The Russians came into the rescue. But the one major area where the U.S. has staked a claim is in eastern Syria, where the oil is. And the Kurds have been given control of that. And American oil companies are doing deals with the Kurds. It's totally illegal. But they're doing it, and that's why they're doing it.
The Kurds have also been vaunted by many parts of the left.
Yes, that's true. There's
and I don't get it. Really.
Well, that's another subject.
That's another story.
I mean, the Kurds have always wanted their autonomy, and there was a very, I don't know, a pretty valiant group of Kurds up in northern Syria that were able to stake out their own area. But I mean, the Kurds they're always used, sadly. They've always been shafted as far as I can see. So,
Jews were used also.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the tales in my book. The Jews, the Arabs, the Kurds, they've all been used by competing powers. Is a tragedy.
Okay, I'd like to intervene here for a moment and ask, because we have members of the Middle East Task Force, the WILPF Middle East Task Force that are here, and lots of other knowledgeable people. And please ask a question.
We have a question from Barbara Taft.
Okay.
And I'm going to unmute Barbara. Hang on, I've been muting everybody so that there wouldn't be any more competition. It's not coming across very well. Barbara, you want to unmute yourself?
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of things. As co-chair of the WILPF Middle East, committee, one of the things that I have done over the years is to try to keep track of what's going on over there. But even before that, I did my master's thesis on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And even before that, I typed master's theses, one of which was by a Lebanese gentleman who wrote about the sectarian system of government. And I think that's one of the reasons that people have a lot of trouble understanding what's going on there. So I'm going to do a quick capsulization of the sectarian system. When it was put into effect, the Constitution said that according to the census at the time, that the majority should be in power. But there was nothing that would change that. The majority was the Christian Maronites. They got the highest position of power, and most of the other groups got lesser positions. Demographics have changed. Now the majority is not Christian, and they felt powerless. So what has happened is that there has been an international move to side with whichever religious group you want, so to speak, and the US and Israel sided with the Maronites, a minority against the majority. And this has created a real chaos in the region. It was the cause, according to a lot of my Lebanese friends, of the civil war, not any other things, but power and who is in charge there. So what has happened is that today, the groups that are not in a majority in Lebanon have more power still, because that never was changed. Constitutionally, they still have the power. And what has been occurring is that they have usurped all of the power of the majority of the people, and the people have rebelled against it. The Palestinians fall into this picture because the majority of them were Muslim, and most of the country did not want to have them have more power than the people who were actually Lebanese, even though they swelled the majority of the population. So we've got complexities here. Also, in the last few weeks, there was a direct conflict between Israel and supporters of Hezbollah, Shiite Muslims, who were in Lebanon, and there was threat of retaliation for some cross-border and within other countries killings that were going on, and Israel was threatening to retaliate. We still don't know whether that's what happened. And I'm going to throw in one last thing, which is that some of the first people who were interviewed said that the first explosion was fireworks, and they saw fireworks going off in the sky, and that they think that the fireworks going off might have ignited this massive explosion that happened later. So a lot of things that we don't know the answers to, but they fit together in a very sloppy jigsaw puzzle.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Apt. Even when I was in Lebanon, it was a joke that the Maronites were in the majority, because after this sectarian formula was created, they never did a census. They knew the Muslims were increasing in numbers, and they didn't do anything about it. So that's something that's a sore point in Lebanon. I didn't get fully into Hezbollah, but you're absolutely right. Hezbollah, I'll tell you why Hezbollah is very strong in Lebanon now. It didn't even exist when I was there. Hezbollah is strong because there was an invasion by Israel in Lebanon in 2006, I think it was. The Hezbollah, which was based in the south, which is mostly Shiite Muslim, fought back. And they fought back so hard that Israel had to withdraw, and they won the respect of the Lebanese people. And then what they did is they decided to run for office, and they they also developed foundations and services to the poor. So that went over the population. They are, Hezbollah are a fundamentalist, I believe, Islam, and they are allied with Iran. That's why Israel sees them as being so dangerous, because they assumed a lot of power up till now. But we are, in the aftermath, we've already seen that there have been warnings sent to Hezbollah. And again, you got to have to verify everything, I would say, by at least 3 sources before you can prove it. But I saw a picture of Netanyahu at the UN holding his map. Is that real? He showed a map of the port, and I believe he said he was going to hit a Hezbollah arms depot there. I have to verify this. I don't know how credible that is.
Okay, well, we're close to the completion of our hour here. I'd like to just bring up the fact that we have a section of WILPF in past Congresses. Are you in touch with him, Barbara, on an ongoing basis? Barbara Taft, but you're muted.
Our section there has not been very communicative. We're not in touch with them. We're trying to get in touch with them and have not been able to thus far. We're trying. Okay, that's it.
I have.
They were working with Syrian refugees.
This is Ellen. There is somebody who is calling herself iPhone, and she asks, is there a place online to follow Charlotte's research and analysis? And it was suggested people read the book, and I put the information up there about that on the chat box. But she also said, is anyone following financiers' roles in developing conflict, like Lebanon devaluation, monetary wars waged by currency traders?
A very sophisticated question and a good one. What the role of is large financial investments and involvement in Lebanon. And of course, I mean, that's one of the theories out there too, that they want to, the big banks, investors want to, pick up the pieces. Yeah, and everything is very devalued. And what does Lebanon have? It's a resort town. I mean, not a resort. Beirut has its tourist industry, real estate, and banking. That's what it's got. Well, it did have shipping, yeah, but it imported most. Why destroying the port is so devastating to the people. So,
Can you just say something? I know you're going to post, but when you're talking about Hezbollah, I think it's important to say that the United States regards Hezbollah, and Israel does, as a terrorist group.
Yes, that's right.
So what is the deal? They seem to be a group within Lebanon that's actually helping the Lebanese.
They have a strong base. But the thing is, there are others in Lebanon that don't like them, and I don't know all the specifics of what they don't like. But I think they've sort of been thrown into the whole bucket of incompetence and negligence, and I haven't been able to sort through. But just because Hezbollah has been called a terrorist group, and because it's allied with Iran, and that makes it an enemy of Israel and the United States, you would expect, for instance, the Christian Maronites don't like them being there, just like they didn't like the Palestinians being there. And then there are other groups that don't like them. As I said, I talked to one of the protesters, and this was about 5 days after the explosion. What she told me is they're all of them are bad. Oh, the Arabic word I think is kulam. Get out, get them all out. We are disgusted with all of them. And
What will come in though?
Well, what will come?
Macron to come in.
Oh, well, Macron, yeah, now Macron coming
Did
in.
they ask him or did he just come?
Well, I'm not sure.
Okay, but
I mean, like,
people were coming up to him.
oh my gosh, yes.
Help
And
us feel
yes,
westernized.
yeah, the French are coming back. Oh boy, you know, the French never appreciated being essentially kicked out of Lebanon.
Or
So,
anywhere.
true. So here's
Africa.
a great opportunity. Other people have said that, you know, Macron is representative of high finance. Some people say he's allied with the Rothschild family. I don't know if that's true. Yeah, and the neoliberals are going to try to move in a big way. And now, in that sense, then you've got Trump's grand plan for Middle East, and part of that is like building resorts on the Red Sea, and hotels especially, and then there's the whole energy corridor. So there are big plans afoot. And in fact, the latest news is that Israel has formally allied with the United Arab Emirates, which is located on the eastern side of the Arabian Peninsula, has plenty of oil, and has been a quiet ally with Israel in the war in Syria and the war in Yemen. They have American-supplied troops, American-supplied arms that have gone into those two wars. And so having this alliance has everyone talking, and I don't know what to make of it.
I think you can make of it. It doesn't do the Palestinians any good.
Well, that's for sure. No.
But also, don't you think, I mean, Robin had asked why this moment, and I thought it's a perfect moment because coronavirus is overtaking everybody's attention.
Yeah.
And it's just like the 6-day war, remember?
Yeah.
But Egypt couldn't respond. You know, they saw it was a perfect time of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone can hear you, but Barbara Soros is bringing up the virus, and we need to close. Do you want to make a closing comment?
Watch the news carefully, and when there's another major event, stay tuned for the first 48 hours. I think as world citizens, I think we all have to pay very close attention because it's a very dangerous time, and it could just get worse. Anything could spark a conflagration.
Yeah. So everyone, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you notice here, you hold this on me now, my wonderful banner, because this year is the 100th anniversary of suffrage, as most of you know, and we're all celebrating that. I'm also carrying the last peace crane that is left over from our wonderful Hiroshima and Nagasaki events, where we took over the streets of Burlington. So one question is, this was what we are calling a hybrid Zoom experience, which means not everyone is actually in a picture in the Zoom frame, but a number of us are here and they participated, and you were able to maybe hear them or maybe not hear them. There are two more coming up. The one with Elizabeth Shackelford at 2:00. I'm hoping we will get into the subject of Africa, and that she was stationed, and she wanted to be stationed in South Sudan, which has become a country just since 2011. But maybe she can tell us about other countries in Africa. And then tomorrow is with Samina Nazir in Pakistan. So one continent to another. So I hope you join us for our next two sequences, and take some rest in between. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.